All right, we're live. So for everyone that is tuning in live, thank you so much. Thursday End Hype Live. We're here to answer your questions, bring on experts that I find fascinating. Tonight we have my friend Kelli, and she's gonna talk us through some really great tips, some sticking points that I know that all of the startups, the innovators, the misfits out there that are listening that have, right? And people ask me these questions, and you've probably heard me say it, but I love getting this other perspective and this other person to put it in their words, because maybe that's going to be the thing that will resonate with you. It'll get you up off the couch. It'll get you to change your life, change the world, get super excited. I don't know, but I'm just rambling on. I'm always really excited for these lives, so I'm trying to bring the energy. But Kelli, thank you
Yeah,
so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I get like the cliff notes or the spark notes for the youngins that are watching of who you are, what do you do, how did you get started? Just give us that 20,000-foot view.
I absolutely will. And Kelly, thank you so much for having me on. I hope that I do inspire people to get off the couch to their ideas. That's a tall order, but I will try my best.
Yeah.
No, and I love, I've always loved over the years, bouncing ideas off of you. So I'm glad we actually get to do it in this format because it's very fun.
Yeah.
So I would say like a 20-foot thousand view of me. So I've been working in the innovation and science and tech space for about 12 years now, both in the government-funded research and development space and also the private sector. And my current company's focus is really on commercialization and growth strategies for both companies and inventors. And the idea of the company really grew out of an observation that I had working tangentially in both of those worlds. And in particular, it was really the hard and fast rules of each, right? So it's the culture around how they operate and make decisions. It's the industry-specific jargon that each of them use, and then how each of them really operate as a business. And it seemed to me that there wasn't really an easy way for people to break down those barriers and really identify opportunities for partnership, capabilities, adoption, and business growth. And so what I always thought was missing was this human side of business, especially when it came to innovation. And just a quick note out there. So I'm actually a sociologist by training academically. In a past life, I'm actually trained in the science of conflict and why people go to war. And so what was interesting to me is that a lot of those same principles apply when you're trying to like sell a radical innovation into these audiences, because what I've learned is that it's often not what you put out into the world, it's how you do it. And there are many disparate conditions that can really make or break a product. So I launched my company, H.S. Dracones, to focus on that particular problem about 6 years ago. And it initially started out as consulting, so people would hire me for like ad hoc advice. And then it really grew into me recognizing that there were two main areas that people had as an entrepreneur that they had challenges with. So it was either coming up with their like baseline commercialization and market assessment plan to understand, where their product fits, how it fits, and then like the best path to pursue. And then it was also all these language pieces. So within my company, I also stood up a division of language sciences, which really helps innovators tell their story that's going to resonate to the audience.
That's awesome. And I know that the challenge that people from just everyday people with amazing ideas, it scales all the way up to the smartest people on earth that have of hitting those obstacles, right? Everything seems perfect up here, but then it's like, how do I convey that? How do I know that it's good? How do I decide that it's worth pursuing? And something that's always struck me as interesting is it really is it's the ultimate equalizer, right? Is that when I went to the high school and mentored kids at the high school with their inventions, they had the same problem that people that we've worked with at NASA and research labs have, where they're like,
people, right? I mean, we're all going to face the same challenges. It's just the extremity of those, the extreme nature of those challenges just change based on
sure.
whatever problem you're trying to solve.
I think that's great. And tell us, before we jump into some of these other questions, you have the coolest company name like ever, right? So you just kind of like ran right over that speed bump. I want to slow you down. Your company, H.S. Dracones,
Yeah.
and your branding, I like it because it's all. It reminds me of people say the entrepreneur journey, and it kind of like drives me nuts. But you have this whole metaphor around like shipping. I think of myself as a white collar pirate, So in a way, you're looking for opportunities, and like, how did you come up with that name, and what does it mean for you? Because it's so different, like in the business consulting world.
No, I appreciate that question, because when I launched my consulting company, I didn't want it to just be like Kelli Kedis Ogborn strategy, right? Because there's just too many of those.
Pinnacle Strategies Incorporated.
Totally. Think A+ #1 Super America, like however you want. Yeah. So HS Draconis, I wanted something that gave imagery and visualization really to the concept of technology transition, because at its core, that is what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's either taking technology from one market, or a product from one market, and moving it to another, and however that process goes, it depends. But that imagery and that feeling is still the same. And so HS Draconis stands for Hic Sent Draconis, which means here be dragons. It's an old Latin term. And the reason I chose that is when you look at old navigation maps, you see dragons depicted in the waters, and that is meant to signify like unknown, uncharted territory. And so the whole point of our company is that we take your technology through that uncharted territory and really highlight those known unknowns that you're going to face, to make it less daunting and make it more as clear as possible, I guess is the best way to say it.
That's so cool, because it also makes me think of trade routes back in the day, like 1500s, 1600s, where some truly insane person was, hey, we're going to go sail off far past the horizon, and there might be success out there. And then the person that pioneered it, they come back and they say, okay, who's willing to follow me? I've figured this out. Like, I can help you navigate, and there's riches over here. I'm going to start this little trading company.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, man, that makes so much sense for tech transfer, right? It's like, how do you get the spices, right? The spice of innovation from one place and bring it back home.
Well, and a lot of it too really comes down to, because everyone's heard the saying like fortune favors the bold, and it really is true, right? Because entrepreneurs, in some way, it is very risky, but you're going to be the most successful if at least you know what those roadblocks might be and have strategies to be able to mitigate them. And so you're never going to be out of the clear, right? But at least you can say, I anticipated this, and these are 4 different ways I can get around it. So it just allows your path to be a little more linear, even though it's never linear.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just thought there's so much power wrapped up in that name. I just wanted to get it out there, because I couldn't miss up that opportunity. But when I go out, and I'm doing customer interviews right now, because we're in the midst of like tweaking some of my messaging and picking what I think is going to be the core audience, like the niche audience of me. And like, whenever I talk to people, I ask them what their top problems are, because I want to make sure I'm solving like a top 1 or 2 or problem. But like, so you're kind of in the same boat. You get to talk to a lot of people. What's the top 1 or 2 problems that you just see over and over that they face, that you're like, oh, if they say this, like, I've got the
hook in them.
Well, I mean, the hook is we're going back nautical, right? But you're like, yes, this is what I do, this is what I solve, and I know that they really have this problem ready. Let's go. Like, what's that top problem that people face?
No, it's a great question. I probably think there's two. So the first one would be analysis paralysis.
Ooh.
And I think that every person, right, every human can relate to this in some way. But what I've seen before, especially with new companies looking to, well, actually it applies to a whole swath of people. So the people that we work with are existing companies that are looking to move into a new market. So they might be completely successful in one vein, want to move into another, or new companies, that people that want to further think through their idea, or products, or I would rather say like prototypes coming out of a lab that want to move into the commercial market. So all of them actually share the same problem. And what I've realized is what it boils down to is that when you think of the task of commercialization, right, and growth exercises or strategies, they can be extremely daunting and extremely intimidating. And you're sort of faced with this plethora of options. And so moving in one direction toward a commercialization path inherently means you're moving away from another, which scares people, because you'll always wonder if you're leaving money on the table, or if you're going in the right direction, or if that is the actual best opportunity. And so what we do when we work with our clients is really to make sure that they know why they are going after those opportunities. We have this concept in our company that really applies to everything. We call it innovation with intention. And so making sure that they understand the path that they're going after is the best path from a commercial stance, from a financial stance, from an ROI stance. The other piece too is that they really need to understand if commercialization is even feasible, right? Because I've seen so many people put the cart before the horse, and they run into this like customer discovery phase without even understanding if they themselves can service those customers. So you can go out and sell a product and get someone really excited about it, and then you actually don't have the staff or the product to do what you said you were going to do. And so it's just making sure that you're making the right choice, and that you're not, you know, sort of like stuck in this motion, not going in any direction. I think that's probably the first one. And then the second one, which is a little more human centric, but it's letting your conviction dictate your strategy. And what I mean by this is every entrepreneur gets into the game for some very strong reason, right? They either have a problem that they want to solve, or a customer base that they want to work with. And in their mind, that becomes like an actual truth. So that is the truth of where their company is going to go. But they actually haven't engaged that group yet, and they don't know if that's the right opportunity. And so people can end up spinning their wheels and wasting time, money, and energy trying to go after what they believe to be true, as opposed to letting the process dictate that. And so, as you know, the entrepreneurial path is very messy. I mean, it's supposed to be, but those nuggets that you gain along the way should really dictate your strategy, and not where you thought you should be going. It's like a constant journey.
Wow. Yeah. So that's like trust the process, be a little bit more agnostic about outcomes. I really like both of those pieces. I've tried to message some of those in a very simple way. It's like the part about having the customers and not being able to service them really resonates with me, because with my successful coaching clients or product development clients, one of the biggest things that people don't anticipate is like they build businesses because they want to have a business, or they want to create something amazing, or they see an opportunity, and then they build a business that they hate.
Yeah.
And they realize like, hey, maybe I make twice as much money, but I have like 10 times the responsibility. Or in the worst cases, they don't like their customers. So as far as servicing them, like even if when they have the infrastructure, they're like, oh, I hate the data center market. This is like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, the best part about being an entrepreneur is like you get to choose. Like you can be mission centric, right? And so aligning your like, this is the life that I want to lead. Like this is how I want my life to look like, ideally, right? And am I moving closer or farther away from what my ideal state is? Like you get to travel around a lot. I like to travel, and it's like I come from a entrepreneurial family where we have heavy infrastructure, and I tell people like if you don't want to travel, like a heavy infrastructure business is great. But if you want to go like if you want to go to Bali, like I'm trying to go to Bali, it's closed right now, but I mean, you can't just do that, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, so you say like, hey, I want to build a business that's going to make my life look like this, and people miss it. But that's just, it made me think of that with the customers, because it's so common with successful people. I see them running an 8-figure business, and they're like, they just have a job that they hate,
Yeah.
essentially, and like tons of stress. And from the outside, everything looks great.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think it also comes down into the fact that people underestimate how long it actually takes to do all the other stuff to make your business successful beyond having a product, right? So part of what we do with people when we do these commercialization strategies is we really marry like their product development roadmap to the human element of it, right? Which is like all the business development stuff. So whether it's
Yeah.
sales, marketing, I mean, it's essentially all the stuff that's going to make it so that when your product is ready to launch, there's a place for it to go. But a lot of that is also like the really not fun stuff, right? It's like, if you have an MVP that you're pushing to come out, say next March, but in order to do that, you have to have a very particular engineering skill set, you need to hire for that person. And you need to build into your strategy the time that it actually takes to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck, right? So I think by putting them in tandem, people can actually see all the work that's involved and then push that off, because so many entrepreneurs get in over their head, because then it's just them trying to do all of it, and then they hate their life because they're working like 23-hour days, even though, and not on the fun stuff.
Life is a group project, right? So if
that.
you know, so it's like, I know that a lot of the smarter people that want to get into business, they're like, I can do so much of this, and I have to show them like the product development's like 10%, if that, of actually running a business. It feels like a lot right now, and it feels like if I bring on somebody that's going to help me with the business part, they're not going to do anything. But then as soon as the product is like halfway being developed, it starts to switch, and then eventually it flips on its head, and there's accounting that needs to get done, which then morphs into a CFO role, and there's a guy that's helping you realize the thing, and that morphs into a COO role, right? And it's like there's those posts that you're putting on Facebook and LinkedIn and some emails you're writing, and that morphs into a CMO role, and you're like, damn, that one business guy that I hired, he's in charge of all this stuff, and I just get to design cool stuff. It's like, yeah, dude, like you need to partner really quickly, because there's so much more going on. And if you hate that, then maybe you should be a freelancer or a consultant, or go back to being an employee, because there's no successful business in the world where they don't have to work with other people, right? It's not. I mean, I haven't encountered one that's not like a freelancer, and a freelancer, like you have the most bosses probably possible. So I don't.
You're absolutely right. And your whole point about kind of designing the life that you want as an entrepreneur, I think that's one of the main things that people need to understand is like what being an entrepreneur and running a company and commercializing actually means for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because is it going to be something where it sounds glorious to everybody, right? Like, oh, let's run my own business and let's do X. But we all know that we work harder than most people, because we're working like the job of like 10 different people. But I enjoy it. I know you enjoy it. We're hustlers. But like some people might just want to, license their technology and just rake in some money. And so they really need to understand what that looks like.
Yeah, perfectly credible way to create money, and if that's what you want to do, go for it. Does it align with your personal mission, what you want to do? But it's something, there's something in our culture, maybe right now or just in general, that people feel guilty when I ask them the question like, well, who do you want to be? Like, what do you want your life to look like? And they're like, man, I thought this guy was a business consultant. Like, why is he asking me this? And I'm like, because if you hate your life, you're going to ruin your business, right? If you ruin your business, you're never going to get anything made. And I make most of my money when you manufacture tons of awesome stuff. So like, it's in my vested interest to make sure that you enjoy and you want to grow and all that good stuff. But it's like, yeah, do you want to spend the next 10 years growing this company and sell it? Do you want to like should it be a family heirloom? You're going to go IP? Are you going to, like all those decisions? It's like really impacts innovation in a big way. And um, here's the literal $1 million question, right?
I'm ready.
Okay, here it is, right? How do we know an opportunity is real? How do we know that we should pursue an idea and create like innovation?
Yeah.
It's the $1 million question, right?
It truly is. And if I get it right, I expect $1 million in return.
Not from this show, just
yeah. So I think that I approach the question differently, and partially because, like I said, my background of being a sociologist and looking a lot at like the human side of innovation and entrepreneurship. But at a top level, I think that like an opportunity is a lot more difficult to measure because you can't just look and listen to the specific metrics that people look at. So a lot of times people will say, okay, well, there's a market predictions and trends that are saying X, Y, and Z, and so therefore this is going to be a good market to go into. But just because, I always think of it this way, but like just because something sounds good and the technology is possible doesn't mean that it should be developed, right? It's like, you don't use all the time, like you don't need another food delivery app. I mean, you can create one, but it might not be necessary, right? Because it's a crowded space. I think that when I think about this question, I also always think of Dale Carnegie, our good old buddy, Dale Carnegie. And, he always says that like when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with creatures of emotion and not of logic. Oh. And this really drives a lot of the things that I talk to with my clients, because when you're trying to gauge an opportunity, like it really is a visceral kind of feeling, right? Because like people are motivated by emotion to buy. And there's one driver that's stronger than that, and it's motive. So if you can actually figure out like what's the motivation of someone to want something, I think then you can actually see if there's a there. And so the way that I always gauge it is like, does it generate excitement, right? And that really comes from really being close with like your customer and engagement strategy plan, and actually seeing like how people react to you talking about your product or service. It's kind of like dating, right? Like when you meet someone for the first time, like off the bat whether or not you want a second date. And if you're really excited about someone, you're going to call them. It's kind of the same thing. Like if you can understand and see that sort of momentum and see that light sort of go off, I think there's a there. It's then just pursuing it and keeping the momentum going. It's not like a hard or fast rule for me. It's just kind of gauging that human reaction piece.
That's awesome. That definitely fits into kind of our model of customer obsession, customer centric innovation. Because it's like, yeah, if you really care about these customers, it's easier to sell too, right? Like later down the road, because you're like, I know they want this and I know it's going to help them. And I know because I've talked to 20 people like this, that this is really going to be helpful. So you don't feel like slimy or like you're trying to get it over on somebody. You're like, they're going to get 10 times the value for what I'm selling out of this. So like it makes the whole process easier. It makes you feel better from a fulfillment standpoint. But like on a technical business innovation standpoint, it's like if you have the ear of the customer, they'll come up with all your other ideas, because they'll say like, hey, you solved this problem for me, Kelly, I have this problem too, what do you think? Or here's the 10 other problems I have in my business, and you're like, well, 2 of these I already solved, so I can fix that, and 2 of these I got a guy for it,
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think too that by design, I think entrepreneurs can be like, everyone's looking for the next unicorn, right? Or everybody wants to have a revolutionary, game-changing X, Y, and Z. It doesn't actually have to be that complicated. It can actually be very simplistic, because I can't tell you how many times I've watched Shark Tank and I'm like, don't understand why that's a product, but I would definitely use it because I have that problem, right?
Yeah.
And I find that sometimes entrepreneurs suffer from like over-design. They just suffer from over-design because they're trying to make something too complicated to push into a market because they can, when the first or second sketch is actually what the customer needs. And that's what they get excited about, because it's the easiest to bring into their life. It's the easiest to onboard. There's this concept that people use in marketing and sales, that it's an acronym called MAYA. and it's most advanced yet acceptable. And so if you think about it, it really applies across the board when it comes to innovation, because you don't want something that's completely foreign, right? That feels uncomfortable, but you want something that's like just advanced enough that's going to make it easier for you to adopt.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that makes a ton of sense, because you can differentiate in the market, you can go to market faster, and if you have we call a V2 product, right? So if you capture the customer, you can take that revenue, that interest, the traction. Like if you need to go out and get investment, you can get investment, and then you can say, but what we really want to do is we want to do, there's the vision. They'll say, that's insane. Well, I already have 1,000 customers. I already have this thing.
And they're indoctrinated to your product. You've built trust. They know you, and then you roll out what's more sophisticated. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And it's like everyone wants to build what Facebook is now instead of the Facebook, what it was when it started. And I have to pick on that, because it's so perfectly demonstrable. But yeah, okay. I mean, that makes sense. There's a quote about product market fit where I want to say this is a Y Combinator quote, where it's like, you'll know product market fit because you'll have customers bugging you to buy your stuff. You won't be able to keep it in stock. You won't be able to hire fast enough. It's like, that's what product market fit feels like, like you're a firefighter, right? And people are like, how do I know this opportunity is real? I'm like, did you do a customer interview where somebody was like, I'll pay you money for this to exist? like, yes, that sounds fantastic. Like, when can I buy it? Like, it doesn't matter how much it costs. Like, can I invest? Can I do a partner deal with it? Like, are you getting absurd levels of feedback? And I don't know. I feel like we have like limited time to do crazy ideas, because as we get older, we have to do more and more sane things, but we have like limited time anyways. So we want to do big, cool things, but why spend a bunch of time and money and effort, like emotion, on something that doesn't just absolutely light people up, right? It's just, it's to me, it's safer to do something that's crazy, that people are crazy about, than to do something that I don't know if people really like it or not. And it feels like there's like a small gap in the market. I'm like, I don't know. I'm weird. I always see like these little opportunities, but I'm trying to do something really, really big. And I don't know.
Because it captures a broader user base, but it also makes more impact, right? I mean, you can do the more niche, small thing, but it's not going to get people excited. Back to my emotion comment, right? Like, people want to be like excited in what they're engaging with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're absolutely right.
Yep. So that's the $1 million question. Something I'm thinking about all the time. Probably my second question. That's my question right under, who do you serve? Who do you want to serve? That's the thing that I'm always thinking about. Is like, who first, and then like, if they mention something, how do I know that that's real? Like, how do I know that an opportunity is something that's worth pursuing? So that's amazing. That's great. So here's a more fun question, I guess, is like, what's a common misconception, or what I like to say is a belief that doesn't serve you, right? A belief that doesn't serve your clients, that face them, that prevent them from succeeding. What's something that they tell themselves that really just, I call them perceived obstacles, right? You can't, like, I can give you all the money and all the resources, all the tips and the strategies and the tactics in the world, but you can't defeat a story that doesn't serve.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. There's probably two that have been common themes. So the first is that it will be easy. And let me break down what that actually means. So as you know, like in the innovation game, there's a lot of hype, hence why I love the name of these podcasts, right? Because
hype.
and it needs to happen. Because there's I know, your brand is always on point. It's always on point. Well, because there's like tons of buzzwords, right? And it's like very
Yeah.
sexy to be an entrepreneur, and many, back to my point earlier, feel that like if something sounds good, right? Or if a technology is like pretty intricate, that the company or the idea will just sell itself, right?
Ooh.
So
Yep.
I've encountered tons of people that are like, but this is so great. Why doesn't everybody want it? Like everyone's going to flock to me. And it's like, well, there really are two proofs of concept, right? It's if your technology or product works, and then if the market wants it. And the market is the harder nut to crack, because that's the people piece. And as I mentioned before, like people are really messy, right? So I find that messy in the best way possible, but we're very, erratic creatures, and we're not a one size fits all cookie cutter type thing. So I find that a lot of people just think that they're going to be the next like second coming of Facebook, like what you said, example. But
I like that.
understand like all of the hard work and elements that go into that. And back to the point that we made earlier, by understanding how you actually want your business to be set up and what commercialization means for you in terms of success, because everyone has a different measure of success. Let that drive it, right? As opposed to just thinking that you're going to put in the minimum effort for the maximum return. So that's
I like that one. That's for sure, because there's this interesting part about neurology and the way that your brain has evolved and been set up is like it looks for scarcity, but it looks for scarcity and opportunity as well. So like there's two pieces of your brain that like on a physical basis are tricking you. One is that if something is difficult, like it's not the correct path, because I'm like, oh, I'm looking for like the easy animal to kill. I'm looking for the easy like piece of fruit to eat or whatever. So there must be something that's more optimal. But then the little lizard part of your brain, right? It only wants difficult things. It only craves the scarcity that comes with doing something difficult. So if it was easy, my dad always says, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And I'm like, well, there's lots of easy things in life that everyone does. You don't even realize them because you don't crave them or want them. So it's like we want to be entrepreneurs or we want to be successful because it's rare, right? It's newsworthy because it's rare.
right.
And people come into with the one part of their brain that's searching for optimization, and they want it to be easy, and they think it should be because they're really smart, right? And they're like, I can work through this problem. I'll find the easy way to do it. And I'm like, but if it was easy, you wouldn't even want it.
Oh yeah. Well, your brain actually does you one further, to your point too, where it actually makes it difficult, sometimes difficult to sell radical innovation. So to your point, going back to the hunter and gatherer phase, your brain has naturally evolved to reject things that they don't aren't necessarily inherently like normal to you. Because if you think back then, like the in crowd, out crowd thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People wanted to be outcasted because you could get eaten by like bears and wildebeests and other things. And so it was better to just conform. The problem is we have evolved as a people. Our brains have not evolved much past that. So a lot of times when someone is told something that's factually accurate, if it's so foreign to them, they naturally reject it. And so therefore you have to message it in a way that actually is going to get over that hump and make sense to them.
That's awesome.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
I will say one more thing about your misconception that I think is important to say is also it's probably people's apprehension to partnerships. And you talked a bit about partnerships before, but I've seen this a lot, and especially because some of the folks I work with are coming from academia, right? Mm-hmm. Or are coming from environments where they're so used to like fighting for research dollars and fighting for some sort of, I guess, like staking some sort of claim. But one of the things that I always tell folks is that you have to allow other people to come in order to scale. Because I've seen a lot of people that need somebody like with a certain expertise or skill set to round out what they need to grow, but they are worried that it's going to shrink their part of the pie. And instead of giving somebody like 5 or 10% of your company, you don't do anything. And so therefore they end up owning like 80% of a company that makes $0.
I love that. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're making $0 and you don't have a business, you have a hobby, right? So it's understanding, like, you have to bring in the right people, of course, but it's not being scared about partnerships, because what did you say? Like life is a group activity?
Life is a group project.
True. It's so true.
Yeah. So like I have one of our like big principles in the coaching framework and just talking to people in general is like one, yeah, overcoming the apprehension to getting teams or like using outside companies, some flavor of that, but like I just had this conversation with somebody and they're on the opposite. They've already overcome this hurdle, and we were talking about this is like this is a way to hack learning really really fast. Is I talked to somebody last week, and it's kind of a similar conversation. They wanted to learn marketing, and I said, okay, well, you're already running a business, right? So you could spend the next 3 months like learning everything you need to know about marketing, right? Uh, I would buy a cheap Udemy course. I'd run through it in the weekend. I would contact who wrote that course that you think is great and tell them about what you've done, but then see if you can get them as a mentor or you can hire them and work with them, invest, and maybe you can afford it. They can afford it, right? They just want to do it themselves because they think it's easy.
Yeah.
but but I was like, if you think that it's easy, like partner with this company, and then you'll be like sitting shotgun. You'll see like the whole process, and you'll see if you like it. But you'll learn all the techniques from somebody you already know is credible,
Mhm.
and so you'll either get a ton of knowledge really really fast, like years worth of knowledge within months, or you'll get an awesome partner. So like, do this for me, and let's like cut through these pieces because
Oh,
they're like on YouTube just like aimlessly trying to like learn a whole huge marketing skill set. I'm like,
I definitely fell victim to that when I first started my company, and partially because it's something I've recognized in myself. I'm a bit of a perfectionist to a fault, and I sometimes in the beginning let perfection be the enemy of good, right?
oh yeah,
And I would sit there and I wanted to like double and triple check something. I had a virtual assistant at that point, and I ended up spending more time double checking their work, even though it was fine, to just know that it was up to my standard to push out to a client. And so I ended up getting rid of them. But I've had to even overcome this apprehension toward partnerships to
yeah.
tell people that there are certain tasks that can be taken off my plate that I can give to folks. It's only going to allow me to be more successful and do the things that truly my skill set needs to be focused on.
That's awesome. With teams, uh, I think that I have like I get kind of under people's skin because I'll tell them, oh, you need a dumber person, right? And they're like, I don't want a dumb person on my team. I'm like, no, no, no. I want somebody that's dumber about what you know.
Right.
But I have to get their attention, right? So say, yeah, you need a dumber person on
Yeah.
your team. But I mean, like, hey, you're a software developer, right? You have a master's degree in this, you know everything about this. So why are you trying to find another software developer to be your co-founder? This makes zero sense.
Right.
So you just have more of the same skill set. Like, what is this person going to bring to the table that you couldn't outsource because you already understand it? You're just getting like more of the same flavor. So we're building like we're building like the full course. You just have more, it's more bread. Like, I don't want more bread.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Yeah.
I got
It- it- they're like, but I like this person and they're really smart, and I'm like, then contract with them. But where's the business person? Like, where's the project manager, or the COO that's like going to keep you on your task and coordinate things and evolve the business? Where are these other pieces? And that's when the apprehension rises up, and they're like, oh, I don't know about those things. If you can overcome this, then you have a business. Otherwise, it's kind of a hobby.
I completely agree. And I think that what I've learned, at least some good advice that I was given to me about how to know where you should partner, is to take inventory especially if you're like a very lean company, and if you're a solo entrepreneur, but to take inventory of all the various things you do throughout the day and which ones you enjoy and which ones you don't enjoy.
Ooh, yeah.
You can honestly look at it based on your to-do list. Like, I'm one of those people that has a very long to-do list every day.
Yeah.
You better believe the ones that I don't want to do, unless they're time oriented, get done at the end of the day, right? You know what you're more apt to do first. And so that's just what you naturally gravitate towards. So it makes it easier to whittle down as to what you can push off to other people.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Because it's like, yeah, I mean, again, if you're gonna take on the responsibility, the risk, the effort to do something original, to take your unique gifts and build something around that and your experience and knowledge, you're gonna build a business. It's like, why not just do things that you like?
Right.
I mean, there's always going to be things that you dislike, right? And I tell people, just learn enough about bookkeeping to do it wrong, and then get a bookkeeper. So like, I really dislike doing this, and I understand why I pay this person $100 a month to do it, because I hate it. But that it has value, and it kind of goes along the line. But yeah, at least get to do what you like. I don't know. I like talking to people about ideas, so I make sure that I have at least 1 or 2 phone calls a day.
Right.
And I mean, quite honestly, I really like doing this kind of stuff. So if I put it at the end of the day, the whole day, I'm like, I'm just going to get my work done. Then I'm going to jump on and I'm going to talk to Kelly, and that kind of, it kind of makes your whole day a little bit better. It's like, hey, I'm going to get to do this thing that I like to do towards the end. But I like that. It's like your priorities, you can kind of self-hack yourself.
Nobody can avoid it. I mean, it's just human nature.
Yeah.
You gravitate toward it.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, what do you have some like parting tips or words of advice for us? Kind of closing it out, and I don't know. I feel like I have this great opportunity having you on here, so I want to pick your brain, but there's probably like a million questions that I didn't ask that I should have asked. So if there's like, what are the bombs that you can drop, the gold nuggets?
Ooh.
Yeah. What?
I'm trying to
Yeah.
think. No, this has been so much fun, and we could probably talk for another like 7 hours.
Oh, for sure.
I would probably say, since we were talking about, ideas and making sure you're taking the right path, right? All that kind of stuff. And I mentioned it before, and it might be completely obvious, but I think it's worth saying, like, it's people need to trust the process of entrepreneurship, right? I've found that like truly worthwhile ideas go through many changes and iterations. It's just the way that it goes. And part of what I always tell my clients is that like the best business strategy is the ability to pivot, because you
Oh, wow.
never know what is going to come in front of you. And so it's just like keeping your ear to the ground, not getting discouraged, especially when dealing with the people side of selling, because it can be, especially for folks that are more science minded and inclined, right? So for a lot of the we work with, like they're engineers who are used to this like linear process, and then all of a sudden they're dealing with people and they're like, this doesn't make sense because this person did one thing and did another. So I think it's just staying close to that and not being afraid to, I always use the term like kill your darlings when necessary. The problem that I've also seen companies do is that just because they've spent a lot of time and money going down one path, they feel like they need to see it through, even if it's not going to be a success. And so really being able to take a objective look at yourself and your company and say, like, look, like we don't need to scrap the company, but we need to scrap what we're doing and have the courage and conviction to go after something else. And that can be really difficult. But it's truly the only business strategy, right? Like just riding the wave of change.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, because I give this talk on kind of the process, and I draw a line, and I say, like, here's the timeline. This is how people think that it works, and they think that success works like this, or I might be backwards because of the camera, so they think that it looks like this, right? Like this nice little line that moves to the right and moves up. And I'm like, it actually looks like a big squirrely, stringy mess. And we call it a fuzzy front end. And then once we figure it out, there's still waves of success and waves of failure, or waves of like, that wasn't quite the thing, I've got to tweak it. And I mean, as an aside, that's why I like being purpose driven or being customer driven, because I feel like if you have that alignment, you can kind of pull yourself through like, oh, I got a big win today. And it doesn't really go to your head because you're like, but I'm not fulfilling what I'm actually trying to do. So like, this is just another, step on the journey. But yeah, there's this temptation to think that it's like a linear thing. Like I will invent this thing, then I will sell this thing, then I will have a business. And it's like, bro, no.
Right.
No. It's like,
it's not going to be that easy. And it's like,
no. Like, and so to overcome that, so in engineering, there's lots of ways of analyzing, like you come up with a risk register, like analyze the risk factors, come up with mitigating plans and all of these things. Then like if additional risks occur, it's like that's bad planning. Whereas like good innovation happens where we go in stages to discover problems. So you make a prototype of a thing and you're like, the purpose of this prototype is to find out what's wrong. It's not to create a product. I just can't find out all of the risks without building it at this level of fidelity. And businesses are like that too. It's like, I'm going to build a little business that looks like this, and I'm going to offer it to a small group of people. And wow, that really kind of didn't work and I need to change it. But there's this temptation to think that that's wrong. And I'm like, no, that's what an experiment is. Now
right.
we're like, we got to treat it like scientists. We're smart people, right? So it's like the scientific method.
Well, and I love that you're doing these talks to actually shed light on some of this stuff, because further on what you were saying, like there's a lot of advice out there, right? About like how to be an entrepreneur and how to grow a company and how to whatnot. And so like some people think that if it worked for one person, it's going to work for another. I mean, I remember when I started my company, somebody essentially told me that if I slept more than 3 hours a night, I wasn't going to be successful.
Oh,
and
man.
I said, well, I don't function on little sleep. My brain just doesn't work unless I sleep 7 to 9 hours. Unfortunately, I need a lot of sleep, but I get that sleep and then I'm off to the races, right? Like it's not
Sure.
a one size fits all. And so to your point, understanding that, would you call it a fuzzy front end?
Yeah, fuzzy front end.
Yeah, it's wonderful, but it's true, right? Because it's going to be different for everyone. You're going to work through the kinks and then you're going to find the path that works for you, because what worked for one person might not be the way that you need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like when I think the trickiest part for people that want to start is making a delineation between people's like personal advice, like anecdotal type advice, and like the advice of somebody that's actually saying like, hey, I've done this a bunch of times, and like let me give you the difference between giving you a tactic or like telling you what to do and giving you a framework, right?
That's a perfect credit, yes.
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot that's personal to you, personal to your invention or innovation, personal to your style. Like my management style is way different than your management style, let's say. So if you say, hey, this is the best way to hire people, and I'm like, I feel weird doing this, it's not going to work out, right? But this drives me nuts in product development, because people go and they're like, I think Nest is really cool, and I watched a presentation on the team that did Nest, and he says this is how you manufacture a product. I'm like, well, first of all, that was right after they developed their first product, and they made every mistake possible. And the only reason that you saw that video is because they're the person that survived that process. Right? If the other billion people that have tried to do something the way that they did it have failed, and you don't get to watch their YouTube video, that is definitely not the right way. And I guarantee you that they didn't keep developing products like that. So like, because that's not the right way to do it. It's like, please, like I've done this hundreds of times. Let's just look. This is what the process looks like. And it looks a little different one way or the other, but it's a framework,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we do our commercialization strategies with people, we spend a lot of time getting inside their heads, right? About their product, how they want to commercialize, how they see their business running, what customer fulfillment looks like, all of that. Because ultimately what I tell them is that roadmap that we build in the end has to actually work for how they function and do business. Because I could write one for me, it's not going to be as successful. for somebody else, and it also has to be based on what their objectives are. So to your point, we're using this loose framework to put their information on, but put it in a way that makes sense to them and their personality, you know, their trajectory, all of that.
That's so cool. Yep. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. That kind of like puts a few pieces like in my brain. It kind of settles it. But that's kind of that's the thing that I get out of these talks is like you have a totally separate set of experiences, and we have a lot of overlap. So like, you're saying a lot of the same things, but a lot of different things too, but also in a different language. So it's like, I'm listening and mapping it to my own experience and kind of the way that I try to describe it. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like I'm when I respond, it's because I'm like putting pieces together in my little puzzle, my brain puzzle.
Oh, that's great.
But this has been a lot of fun. Kelli, what's the best way for someone to find out a little bit more about what you do, follow you online, get a hold of you?
That's great. I'd probably say the two main ways is LinkedIn. I'm very present on there. I'm trying to be more active on there. I think I mentioned that to you. But I definitely respond to that, and I'm trying to push out more content and engage with folks on that. And then our website, it's just www.hsdracones.com. And my contact information's on there if anyone needs to email me or call me.
That's amazing. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. For everybody that's watching this, if you got any value out of this, and honestly, like I got a ton of value out of this, so like I know that you got a ton of value out of it. Please share this, refer it to a friend. That's how we're growing these live streams each week, and that's how we're growing the content. So trying to bring in people, and we're going to create a movement of people that want to change their life and change the world. And I'm super excited about it, but help me share out the message, right? And do me a favor and blow up Kelli's DMs and tell her that she's amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. And I'll catch you next week. We're doing these every Thursday at 5 p.m. And if there is a specific topic where you're like, this would change my world, message me and I'll talk about it. Or more than likely, I'll bring a friend on and we'll talk about it together. So appreciate you, Kelli. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun. Talk to you soon.
Bye.